Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're diving deep into one of the most monumental moments in history, something that shaped the world as we know it today, the American independence. But don't worry, this won't be your typical dry history lesson. We're going to make it fun, filled with cool facts, stories, and details you might not have heard before. So, let's get started and travel back to a time when a brand new nation was about to be born. Chapter 1. The beginning of a new nation. Alright, let's rewind the clock to the year 1776. The place? North America. At that time, the 13 colonies that would later become the United States were under the control of Great Britain. Imagine living in a place where you have no say in who makes the rules. You're just a subject of a distant kingdom that doesn't even understand your day-to-day struggles. Pretty frustrating, right? And that's exactly how the people in these colonies felt. They were ruled by a king who lived thousands of miles away in London, and every decision about their lives was made by people who didn't even live with them. It's like having a boss who doesn't care about your work and only shows up to check if you're doing your job. No thanks. So, why did these colonists even come to the Americas in the first place? Well, many were looking for freedom from religious persecution, better economic opportunities, or just a fresh start. But as time went on, their dreams of freedom became tainted by British laws that didn't reflect their needs. Imagine building your life in a place, and then having someone from far away tell you how to live, what to pay, and what you can't do. Yeah, that's when tension started building up. Things were about to get very interesting. Chapter 2. The colonists had enough. The situation in the colonies wasn't just about bad communication with the British. It was about a complete lack of control. Colonists were being hit with all kinds of taxes, many of which they had no way of avoiding or protesting. One of the most infamous taxes was the Stamp Act. This law required that colonists buy a special stamped paper for legal documents, newspapers, and even playing cards. Imagine you're just trying to play a card game with your friends, and you have to pay a special tax just for the paper to play. It was crazy. And it didn't stop there. There was also the Townshend Act, which placed taxes on things like tea, glass, and lead, stuff that was imported to the colonies. But the worst part? The colonists didn't even have a say in these laws. It was like paying rent to someone who doesn't live in the same city, and they charge you more every month for no reason. No wonder they started getting really upset. In 1773, the frustration boiled over with the Boston Tea Party. Picture this: a group of rebellious colonists, dressed as Native Americans, snuck onto British ships in Boston Harbor. They weren't there to steal or cause trouble. They were protesting a ridiculous tax on tea. But instead of just writing a letter or having a small protest, they did something really drastic. They grabbed all the tea on board and dumped it into the harbor. In total, they threw away 342 chests of tea, worth millions of dollars today. Imagine the scene: tea splashing everywhere and the British government having a massive meltdown over it. This was more than a protest. It was the spark that set off a huge fire of resistance. The British response? Well, they didn't take it well. In fact, they passed even stricter laws to punish the colonies. One of them, the Intolerable Acts, shut down Boston's port, forcing the city into a state of economic hardship. And instead of backing down, the colonies said, "You know what? Enough is enough." This was the moment when the colonists knew they had to do something big. The tension was unbearable, and they were ready for war. Chapter 3. The Revolutionary Movement begins. By now, the colonists knew they had to do something drastic. So, they began organizing in secret. It wasn't just about protesting anymore, it was about revolution. A group of influential men, including people like John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Samuel Adams, yep, the beer guy, began discussing how they could break free from Britain's control. The idea of independence started to take shape, and that meant they needed a leader. Enter George Washington, a young and experienced military officer who had proven his skills in the French and Indian War. He wasn't just any guy, he was the symbol of hope and strength for the revolutionary cause. Now, here's the thing. At this point, the British Army was one of the most powerful military forces in the world. They had the best weapons, the best training, and tons of experience. On the other hand, the colonists were kind of like a group of underdogs who had no formal army, no supplies, and no real training. They were facing a giant, and not just any giant, but one with huge resources at its disposal. But the colonists weren't afraid of this challenge. They had something that the British didn't: the will to fight for their freedom. The first few battles were tough. The Battle of Bunker Hill, for example, was a significant early clash where the colonists showed they weren't backing down. They were learning how to fight as a team, and they were improving with every battle. And even when they lost, they were learning new tactics and strategies. But the British were getting frustrated. They had underestimated how determined the colonists were. Chapter 4: The Declaration of Independence. After years of tension, protests, and battles, the time came for the colonists to officially say, "We're done with you, Britain." On July 4th, 1776, the leaders of the 13 colonies came together in Philadelphia and signed one of the most important documents in world history, the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't just a list of complaints, it was a bold statement that they were no longer subjects of the British Crown, but instead, a free and independent nation. The primary author of the Declaration was Thomas Jefferson, a brilliant writer and thinker who was only 33 years old at the time. Jefferson wasn't just writing about taxes, he was talking about human rights. He included ideas that were revolutionary for the time, like the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words would later become the foundation of the American identity, inspiring not only future Americans, but also people around the world who sought freedom from oppressive governments. Fun fact: before it was signed, the Declaration was debated and revised several times. The group of men working on it weren't just agreeing on everything. They had different ideas and perspectives, and some even disagreed on the wording. Imagine trying to convince a room full of powerful men, each with their own opinion, to agree on something this important. It was like trying to agree on what movie to watch with a big group of friends, except this was way more serious. But once the Declaration was signed, it was official. The colonists were now openly declaring their independence from Britain. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was the birth of a nation. Chapter 5: Victory and the Birth of a Nation. Even though they declared independence, the war didn't end right away. The fight continued, and it wasn't until 1781 that the Americans scored a decisive victory at the Battle of Yorktown. With help from their French allies, shout out to Marquis de Lafayette, a French military leader who came to America's aid, the Americans were able to corner the British and force them to surrender. This was the turning point that convinced the British government to finally give up on trying to hold on to the colonies. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially ending the Revolutionary War. The United States was recognized as a free and independent nation. The victory wasn't just about breaking away from British rule, it was about proving that the American idea of freedom and democracy could work in the real world. And just a little fun fact to wrap things up. When the United States won its independence, it didn't have all the states we have today. There were only 13 colonies on the eastern coast. The rest of the land, which would later become the rest of the US, was still unexplored and unsettled. The journey for the United States to grow into the nation it is today was only just beginning. So, why is this all so important? The American Revolution wasn't just a victory for the colonists. It was a victory for the idea that people could rule themselves, that they didn't have to live under a monarchy or a dictatorship. It inspired countries all around the world to fight for freedom and equality. It started a global movement for democracy. Conclusion. And that's a wrap, folks. That's how the United States went from being a bunch of colonies ruled by Britain to becoming an independent nation that changed the course of history. From taxes on tea to the signing of the Declaration, this journey was full of twists and turns, but in the end, it was all about freedom. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And hey, next time you hear about the 4th of July, you'll know exactly why it's such a big deal. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.